Out of all the original PlayStation IPs that dominated the early to mid 2000s, none have had the staying power nor impact of Insomniac Games' Ratchet and Clank series. With 10 main entries and a surplus of spin-offs, this chaotic duo have not only made a mark on PlayStation, but gaming as a whole. Even though this franchise isn't as prominent as it once was, to this day, there is still an active fan base looking forward to every new release. Considering the success of Ratchet and Clank, you would think Sony would be quick to capitalize on it with a film or show adaptation of sorts, like they've done with their many other successful IPs. Well, you'd be right. As many of you know, in 2016, Ratchet and Clank would get its very own theatrical film. And it was a critical and financial failure. This can be attributed to many reasons such as lackluster comedy, unfaithfulness to the source material, and no mass appeal. Keep in mind that this project preceded today's PlayStation productions and was a part of Sony's original PlayStation incentive, which saw the likes of Sly Cooper and even Jak and Daxter getting their own respective films before they were shelved indefinitely. Us Sly fans just can't win. After the movie's failure, the PlayStation Originals idea was scrapped until it was revived later in 2022 with the Uncharted film. Suffice it to say, Rainmaker, the animation studio behind the Ratchet and Clank movie, were done with the series and moved on to other things. However, a question that isn't asked that often is, what could have been? What if the 2016 movie was a success and Rainmaker got to continue making Ratchet and Clank projects, say a TV show for instance? Well, ladies, gentlemen, and everyone in between, that brings us to Ratchet and Clank Life of Pi. Sometime back, someone found an entirely finished animated pilot for a cancelled Ratchet and Clank television series, and it was subsequently archived and posted online for all to see. This was handled by none other than Rainmaker, and it shows as we'll get into later. But yeah, to clarify, this TV series was never a guaranteed thing to happen, but this pilot was made sometime around the movie's release, presumably to give Sony an idea of what it would look like had the film been a success and had they been greenlit to do more of the IP. The existence of this thing is crazy, and what's even crazier are people's lack of awareness to it. I didn't even know this thing existed until 2023. So now you may have a lot of questions such as, does the pilot look promising? What does it entail? Well, strap in as we take a closer look at Ratchet and Clank Life of Pi. The premise of this pilot is pretty simple. Clank, having saved up enough pizza coupons, has guaranteed the duo a free box of Cosmic Crust pizza, a brand that Ratchet isn't particularly fond of. However, once the two stumble upon Dr. Nefarious' latest scheme involving a Dimensionator, Ratchet steals it in hopes of going to the pizza dimension where he can get a slice of 300 toppings. Which, I mean, sounds legit. Screw going to the Lombax dimension. A pizza slice of that many toppings is to die for. As you can expect, a lot of shenanigans ensue, things get crazy, and Ratchet learns to be more considerate of his friends' wants and desires and locks up the Dimensionator for safekeeping, which is where the short ends off. What I love so much about this pilot is its general simplicity. In my opinion, Ratchet and Clank is at its best when it's focusing on the core friendship between its two titular characters. It is nice to have an entirely animated, isolated story just following these two in their everyday life, as they argue and get back at each other over something as petty as pizza. It's just such a Ratchet and Clank premise, it's just great. What really makes this short such a treat though, and what also makes it stand out leagues above the film, is the way everyone is characterized here. Seriously, it's crazy how much the writers of this short understood the material and what they were working with. In the games, there's been this increasing problem where Ratchet is being portrayed as like this vanilla goody two-shoes hero type character, when before he had a lot more edge to him. He was a lot more short-tempered and impulsive, which made for a great contrast with Clank, who was very well-mannered and calculating. And I'm happy to say the initial charm of that relationship is present here in this short. You have Ratchet, who is super fun and well-meaning, but has his head in the clouds and is acting very brash and a little selfish. And then you have Clank, the real goody two-shoes, who is kind of sick of dealing with Ratchet, well, being a little too ratchety. What makes these two's friendship feels like an actual genuine friendship is the fact that, like many real-life friendships, it can be strained and contrasting personalities can clash. But in the end, the best friendships are the ones that are able to always come to a resolution and figure things out, which is what we see here. What further adds to the short's authenticity is the fact that they got the game voices back on board as well. You have James R. Taylor reprising his role as Ratchet, you have David Kaye reprising his role as Clank, Jim Ward reprises his role as Captain Quark, which would tragically be his final time returning to the character, and Armin Shimmerman comes back as Dr. Nefarious. The way Captain Quark is written is absolutely perfect. He's that same cowardly, selfish, and hateable, but at the same time extremely lovable failure of a superhero that we all know and love from the games. Like always, Jim Ward brings his A game, and to me, he will always be the true Captain Quark. And Dr. Nefarious is here, and he is just as maniacal and over the top as he is in the games. However, they replaced Lawrence with Zed, and I don't know, you just can't have Nefarious without Lawrence. The two just go together. One doesn't work without the other. But yeah, in terms of writing and characterization, this pilot absolutely excels. But another department it excels at is the absolutely gorgeous animation. Of course, with this being a short pilot and not a full-length theatrical Hollywood movie, the animation doesn't look as shiny or well-polished as the film. However, the characters are just as lively, just as expressive, and the action is a real treat to look at. I would have loved a full-length Ratchet and Clank series with this art style. It's just, One thing I almost forgot to mention is the comedy. While this pilot isn't the funniest thing I've ever watched, the humor is still really charming and feels straight out of the games. There's a lot of fun visual gags, and it's just such a fun time. And finally, one thing I did also find very interesting about Life of Pi is its presumed canonicity. With how well this short embodies the games, you would think it would be canon to the mainline series. However, there's a lot of evidence suggesting the contrary, and it actually might fall in line with the movie's timeline. Not only does the Sheepinator actually make an appearance in the short, which is only a weapon introduced in the film and coinciding reimagining, but Zed is a character who does exist, and this is a character who is exclusive to that 2016 story. And considering this was produced by Rainmaker, it would make sense if this cancelled show was meant to kind of tie into the film universe and further expand upon that in that specific continuity. However, there is some contradicting evidence to this theory as well, considering the Bio-Obliterator is mentioned, which was a thing only introduced in Ratchet and Clank Up Your Arsenal. And Zed is Dr. Nefarious' lackey, whereas at the end of the movie, he was left to assist Grimm at his garage. So yeah, maybe this pilot was supposed to be its own thing and it was taking inspiration from both the movie's timeline and the game's timeline. Or maybe this is another Rift Apart issue where they're trying to kind of shoehorn the 2016 reimagining as the true Ratchet and Clank 1, which wouldn't make a lot of sense because a lot of stuff in the original Ratchet and Clank would further lead to the sequels, which are 100% canon to Rift Apart, especially the future trilogy. I don't know, the timeline of Ratchet and Clank as of right now is kind of a mess with the introduction of that reimagining. I like to pretend it doesn't exist, particularly in the context of the original games, but who knows. So yeah, I think that's really all I'm going to say about Life of Pi. The short is available to watch on YouTube right now, so you can go give it a watch and tell me what you think in the comments. But yeah, I do think this is really tragic for a multitude of reasons. This could have been a really good series, and I would have loved to have watched an entire TV show that had this kind of same writing style and polish in its animation. You can tell a lot of talented people worked on this thing. Unfortunately, the movie's failure prevented this from happening, but you see, this is another aspect of the situation, and I can't stress this enough. I don't understand why in the world was the movie not written this way. Whereas this pilot feels directly from the games, the movie feels like anything but. It's this very kind of commercial, streamlined, hollow shell of what the video games were. Maybe because this was a smaller project, the writers and directors got a lot more creative room to actually pull from the source material, and there weren't as many constraints as there were when making the film. I don't know what the reasoning was. All I know is that if the 2016 film had had the same writing talent as this, it might not have been a failure, at the very least not critically. But the past is the past, and unfortunately this is just how things turned out, which is a shame. But yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I thought this is a really interesting thing to talk about, and I wanted to kind of discuss it here on this channel, because I don't really see as many people talking about Life of Pi. I think it's a really cool pilot, and it's a very interesting what if of what a television series could look like. However, while we may never get an official continuation of the film's continuity, we can always rely on fan projects. Fan projects like my Ratchet and Clank audio drama, Ratchet and Clank Galactic Peril. Come on, that was a flawless segue. You gotta give me credit for that segue. This is an episodic audio series that serves as a fan-made sequel to the 2016 movie, that borrows many elements from the Future Trilogy, original PS2 classics, and so much more. If you're interested in checking out, link will be in the description. Me and the team has worked really hard on it, and it really means a lot if you guys would consider checking it out. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have, then please like, subscribe, and comment what your thoughts are. And as always, I will see you guys next time. Take care.